But to open up the summit today, I just want to talk a little bit about, for those of you who are not familiar with the consortium and some of you who are and are members, I just want to give you a little bit of a highlight reel on what we've accomplished this year and kind of why we want to host this summit. We're really dedicated to bringing the community together, to growing the community and the ecosystem all across the country. We're excited that officially as of this year, we've been able to stand up as a trade association with over 85 members supporting us internationally. So we have members from the UK, the EU, the United States, as well as across Canada. So we're really excited that we're able to act as kind of like that company that's able to bring companies in and support companies all across Canada. So a big thank you to all of the members who have been supporting us to get to this point. Our consortium started back in 2017. So we are the largest industry association and longest running, amazingly enough. We've made it through 2 bear markets at this point, so I'm really proud of us. Right? That is a feat in the industry. So on top of the 16 events, 2 of them which I'm really excited to announce are trade missions. I'm not too sure if any of you are familiar with what a trade mission is, but we were able to work with the Premier of the province of Alberta and convince them to support us going internationally and bringing delegates down to conferences in the States to be able to share the word of what's happening, but also create better credibility within the space. So our last trade mission was really successful. The Premier of Alberta has officially appointed and mandated a minister to actually support the blockchain file within that province. So we now officially have someone that's going to be supporting us and actually doing a roadmap feasibility study. So the government's now even funding a study to see how they can support the expansion of the digital asset and mining industry in the province. We're very hopeful for that study is going to be able to be supported across the country. So once it's published, we'll have government to support to go to other provincial governments, ideally doing more feasibility studies and showing the exponential value that this industry brings across Canada. So I'm really, really proud of that. It's very monumental. There's no other province that currently has a minister mandated to support this. So I'm just excited about that. We've also done 2 research papers. We've built 3 academic programs and have 2 more on the way that are being taught through the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. We've stood up multiple new committees. We've stood up our Center of Excellence. We have some really amazing leads for that through our banking committee, our cybersecurity committee, our virtual asset service and technology provider committee, our regulatory committee, as well as our policy and advocacy committee. So we've done a lot of work being able to engage stronger with regulators, with banks, with cyber. We're starting to work on developing out industry standards as well. And I'm very excited to announce that we're actually underway doing our feasibility study for the captive insurance that we're going to be able to offer. So this industry will be able to supply itself with its own insurance at much more reasonable rates once we're able to launch Q1 of next year. So that's also really exciting, and that's come out from the consortium. But without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce our first, it's kind of like an opening remarks fireside chat, so I'm giving you a little highlight on kind of what the consortium's done. If you're curious to learn more about us, there's myself or Jade, our VP in the back. Please reach out. We'd love to talk to you more and see if you want to join our amazing community. But I'm going to read this bio because I do not want to butcher it whatsoever. So I'm going to be inviting Kyle. Do you want to come to the stage? So Kyle is the Director of Public Policy at Foundry, and an upstate New York-based company focused on empowering decentralized infrastructure and Bitcoin data centers across the United States. He has a variety of federal and state government positions, most recently working as a special advisor for state operations in New York State Executive Chamber. Prior to this role, Kyle spent most of his career serving the U.S. as a U.S. intelligence officer, which was preceded by a diplomatic post as an advisor to the special envoy for Guantanamo Bay closure at the United States Department. He is a former White House fellow during his time, which he worked across different national security and federal budgeting portfolios. And over the course of his career, he has lived and or worked in over 60 countries and continues to bring Foundry forward-looking mission to the forefront of domestic and international affairs. He also holds 2 master's degrees from Columbia University. Can you tell? Major class.
Well, a little bit of a big table for a fireside chat, but we will make do. Oh, hold on, sorry.
Thanks for reading the whole bio or something.
Well, it's really impressive, so I kind of had to. Don't mind me. I'm also going to be the one using the little clicker. And before I do, I also just want to really, really thank our sponsors. So can we give a shout out for Osler, who's allowed us to It's a really big shout out because I tell you, it was difficult for us to be able to come into a whole new province and do a big summit. And the fact that they opened up their offices, we have an amazing lunch that's going to be provided. There's an evening reception, so really, really thankful for them. Also, shout out to Virgo and Wonderfy. You can see all the amazing swag that you have on your table. There is swag bags, so please take whatever you'd like home. They're awesome things. Thank you so much to our silver sponsors, Patano, Block Zero, Chainalysis, NDAX, and then to our bronze sponsors, Lincoin, KPMG, Tetra, and Tamatet 72. I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher that one. And then to our media sponsors, event contributors, and community partners. We can't do events like this without sponsors, so just thank you guys so much for being able to support us. And now I'm going to start with the actual demo.
I feel like there's a bit of pressure from Elon's fireside yesterday.
Oh,
I don't want. I'll use a few less GFYs. But, you know.
well, honestly, like we can say pretty much anything up here. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. There might be some regulators in the office, so maybe mindful of a couple of things. But just to start off, why don't you give us a little bit more background on Foundry?
Thanks. Yeah, so Foundry works to empower decentralized infrastructure in a number of ways. We do that through our Bitcoin mining pool, which is one of the largest in the world. We do that through a variety of mining services across the United States and globally, to include sort of white glove deployment services, logistics services, Foundry X, which does machine trading, and we also do non-custodial staking services as well. So kind of a wide variety of business streams. My role there is as Director of Public Policy, and in that capacity I'm working mostly in the United States, but wherever needed, usually. And I think as we speak today, when I do speak about the United States, I say that I speak with the knowledge that a lot of US and Canadian policy tends to overlap and follow each other. And so I think whatever we're talking about there is applicable here as well. Regarding my background, you heard most of it, and I know we'll speak about national security. I spent the majority of my career as a CIA officer, and a year of that was focused on Iran. And so the biggest topic in policy today is obviously national security when it comes to terrorism in the Middle East, and I think that there's a lot of context we may be able to pull on with regarding Iran and putting in the claims of the nexus between crypto and terror funding or illicit funding.
That is definitely a concern. I know we've seen that in the headlines recently with what's been happening in the Middle East, and I'm really curious on your take. So with the announcement that they raised funds to fund their operation in Bitcoin, essentially, how do you see that potentially impacting the industry or regulation in the Canadian and American ecosystem?
Yeah, so for, I'd say, the first 2 years of my time at Foundry, we spent most of our time fighting energy FUD when it comes to Bitcoin and crypto mining in general. That has completely gone to the wayside since October 7th of the Hamas attacks. We are now left in a situation where the thing that almost every policymaker is caring about is this alleged nexus between crypto and some sort of illicit funding for it. So this has taken front and center stage, and we're doing everything we can to combat it. And in terms of my background, we're talking about a fraction of a percent when it comes to the money that's used from crypto, offshore crypto exchanges, off North American shore crypto exchanges, to have any sort of funding for illicit finance in the Middle East or terrorism, a fraction of a percent. Meanwhile, major terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas have no existence without the Iranian regime. And this has been built up. The funding that comes from Iran has been built up over decades as they expand their reach in the Middle East, which ironically the Western. Oh, is it on here?
Can you guys hear us? Sorry.
Alright, since we're sitting so far
that
back, oh
better?
wow, that's way better.
Can you hear me better now? Because I choose my words very specifically. I'd hate for you to miss anything.
I wouldn't expect anything less from the former CIA operative, you know, you're very curated on our wording there.
I'll repeat a little bit of that, which is the money used in offshore crypto exchanges internationally to fund terrorist organizations in the Middle East is a fraction of a percent. It is at best marginal. And what we're seeing from policymakers now, crypto skeptic policymakers, the most obvious one in the United States is Senator Elizabeth Warren, is an opportunistic attack on the industry. She has certain bills that she has been pushing, and those bills were dying or not having much momentum. And following these attacks, she shifted her attention from energy FUD right to Terror Nexus FUD to sort of opportunistically take advantage of that momentum. And so we are doing our best to combat that.
So what are some of the lawmakers trying to accomplish through this misinformation? Because I was listening to a regulator recently speak, and the concern there is, well, we don't have enough control, right? Like, it's not regulated enough, it's decentralized. We're now going to assert ourselves into this jurisdiction because of the fact that there's not enough regulation in some aspects of it. So it seems more of, you know, wanting to maintain a level of control over things as opposed to, you know, wanting to allow this decentralized ecosystem to just kind of naturally thrive or see where it goes.
I think you're spot on there. Governments tend to think that their involvement improves things. And it is
I know y'all want to laugh more about that.
There you go.
As somebody who has seen how kind of budgeting works from the White House level, and I know it's similar here, there's a lot of gimmicks, and it's nearly impossible to slow the growth of government budgeting and funding. And so with that constant budgeting creep, it sort of incentivizes agencies to go out and get involved in things that maybe they don't need to be involved in.
Do you mean books don't balance themselves? Is that how that works?
And I think that what Warren is trying to accomplish here, for those of you who don't follow U.S. policy that much, she has established that she is creating what she calls an anti-crypto army. And there are a lot of people in the industry who believe that, you know, this is something we can work with. No, she's telling you specifically that she wants to put anybody who's working in this industry in the United States, and it will bleed over to Canada, out of job. She believes the industry should be killed. And when I talk with people in DC, they are actually surprised on how personal she has made this. It may be because we have a very active Twitter X community who go after her as well. But I do think that the major impetus behind her actions regarding this phony nexus between crypto and terror funding to any substantial degree is moved in trying to push this bill that she has called the DOMLA bill, the Digital Assets Anti-Money Laundering Act, which would, we don't need to get into the weeds on it, but essentially it would kill any sort of DeFi in the US. It would have the sort of ambiguity that enforcement agencies can use to pick and choose who they're going after. And so through this bill, if it was enacted as written, I mean, they could potentially construe a Bitcoin mining pool as a money laundering service, right? So there's a lot of problems with it, and it's a major threat. And so she will pivot to whatever is top of mind in the news to try to push this bill. And with the crypto terror nexus that's being discussed now, a lot of policymakers felt something they needed to do. Like, what can we do? What can we do? Like, there's this attack in the Middle East, and it's very controversial. We need to do something, and so this bill was kind of foisted in front of them, and she got 100 people to sign on to a letter saying that this crypto terror nexus needs 100 Congress persons sign on to a letter. And so we are trying to dispel this new FUD that is coming out from her office.
That sounds a little dangerous for the industry for sure. Like, is there any counter perspective that you can give? Because I'm pretty sure like 98% of money laundering is still done in cash. Like, very, very little actually happens in cryptocurrency. I mean,
Right.
unmarked bills from US dollars traveling all around the world is the best way to launder anything versus.
Yeah, it is, I think between 3 and 5% of illicit financing is in fiat, and 3 to 5% of fiat is used for illicit purposes, whereas it's a fraction of a percent for crypto. But I think the context here is that kind of what we were talking about a little bit off microphone, which I'll repeat a little bit, is the Hezbollah and Hamas do not exist without Iran. These are Iran functionaries that have been funded through various proxies across the Middle East over several decades now. And to pay attention to crypto at this point is purely opportunistic, because you're talking about, millions when the amount of funding that's coming in is in the tens and tens of billions. And so it is kind of it is a bit of a misdirection to show, hey, let's use this to get our bill pushed forward.
So I'm also kind of curious because many people I speak to in the industry are concerned about central bank digital currencies. The level of control they can assert over people, basically, like what you spend, where you spend. I know right now in the UK they're saying if you spend more than 1,000 euros per transaction, kind of sitting within the grey market. Australia is basically cutting out cash withdrawals from ATMs. Nigeria basically went CBDC kind of overnight, and their entire economy was based on cash. So I'm just kind of curious, is Elizabeth Warren pro CBDC, and could the fear mongering around decentralized crypto be a way to convert people or push them over into CBDCs, as you wouldn't be able to allow for terrorist financing with digital money that's fully controlled by the government?
Warren and her allies are major advocates of CBDCs.
Oh, that makes sense.
And this is something I think everybody in the industry is part of the reason we got into it, is to, I think, give people a little bit of privacy in their financial life, give them a bit of freedom in their financial life. I know that my first interactions with Bitcoin were in West Africa. I was, there's so many positive things that the technology is used for. I was in a relatively remote part of West Africa. I was really sick with malaria. I was in a clinic, and the nurse was telling me that she was saving some of her money in Bitcoin. And I had maybe read a few outlandish headlines here and there, and I kind of was taken aback. I was like, why the hell would you do that? And she explained that, her parents lost their money to a previous dictator who was using the banking system as a slush fund, and she didn't trust the current government, and so she just put away what she could. She's probably doing a lot better than me right now.
What year was this?
This is probably 2015 or 2016.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
But there's all sorts of stories like that across the world, and this narrative gets lost to the political fear mongering that's happened. We saw in Ukraine and all sorts of situations where there are displaced people, why this technology can be super important. Everybody here in this room knows the importance of remittances and what that can do around the world. And so there is a major disconnect, I think, between the policymakers who have, spent their lives within a system and have very little international exposure. When they do go on a congressional delegation or something like that, it's the red carpets are rolled out. So I think having more international exposure would be great, and more education for these policymakers would be great, because they can learn why this technology is important. Because right now they're saying only bad actors use it, we don't need it, we've got Venmo or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an issue to me where, like, we're lucky enough to live in North America, minus our current governments, but the fact that the majority of the world is basically still unbanked. Like, when you went into El Salvador, 60% of people were currently unbanked. Now, the fact that they adopted Bitcoin as a digital currency, Western Union was expected to lose $240 million just off that alone, based on remittances being able to go peer-to-peer. Now, if you're someone like a foreign worker and you come to the country and you want to send money back, and you have all these middlemen taking cash from you, and by the time it gets to the person that's intended to, you've now lost 10, 15, 20% of what you're trying to send back. That's significant for money down there. Now, of course, there's issues depending on where in the world and the level of infrastructure that they have access to smartphones and all the other kind of things, but it gets them one step forward to being able to access banking. There's places in Africa right now where, not specifically for digital currency, but for blockchain, they were able to increase land title placements by 200 times within a single year, allowing for families who would normally just be considered squatter rights on land, who've been there generationally, now have an asset they're able to leverage against and get access to financial products, like a loan leveraged against the land that they're on. So there's so many benefits, but when you're so entitled in a first world country that you have access to banking and credit, and it's basically entitled to you for being a citizen of the country, it's hard to imagine a third world place where they do not have that access. Like, there was fundraising that happened in Nigeria, because it is in some instances like there's not the best government structure there, and people were not happy with the government, so they were revolting, and the government basically completely cut off their access to financial services, cut off their bank accounts, and they had to do fundraising in Bitcoin to be able to put food on the tables for their children. So just because they opposed the government, all of a sudden they didn't get access to banking, and we even saw that in Canada, which was definitely a little bit scary. So like, digital currency allows for people to have autonomy, and while I appreciate the desire to exert control over a complex system, people should, to me, definitely have the right to be able to go, no, I'd like to be able to have access to financial products outside of just because the government doesn't like what I say or what I do.
I was in the office of just 2 days ago, we organized 40 US military veterans and Intel veterans to go around to different offices in Congress. And we were sitting in the office of a prominent Democratic lawmaker, and he's like, I just want to stop before we start here. How come there are so many former Intel and Special Forces guys coming talking to us about crypto? And I was like, the bottom line is because they've lived on all these places around the world, and I think they've seen the use cases. And I think that's a big part of this. A lot of these guys don't go over and live in a really nice house near the embassy. Like, they're going out and they're doing a lot of stuff, and they're seeing and talking to real people and seeing the use cases of it. And I think that's the major reason why. I spent nearly 6 years in sub-Saharan Africa in some of the most remote places, and I definitely have seen major use cases for the technology. And I think with the continent of Africa having 70% of its population under the age of 30, this is where we're going to get the most adoption and most comfortable with the technology. We're going to see innovation. We're already seeing innovation there, right? Being able to send Bitcoin via text message without an internet connection. This is developed in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we'll see more in places like Africa, South America. The places that need the technology will be the innovators, I believe, in the future, for the reasons that you pointed out.
So what kind of, like, how are you and others helping get this messaging to policymakers, helping people understand the actual value this industry brings and how it supports, I mean, it supports everything, jobs, economy, growth. There's so many benefits to this. How is it that you guys are helping to get that messaging out there?
Bitcoin and other digital assets has an incredible advantage, which is that they can be applied to so many aspects of life. They touch on so many different policy issues, right? Energy, privacy, consumer protection, you know, how to send money overseas, national security. I mean, you pick it and you can probably find some sort of nexus between digital assets and that issue. And so I think what I try to do as Director of Public Policy is understand who the policymaker is, what they're interested in, and connect them with the right group that is able to have the most influence. So if they care about, you know, diversity and jobs in their community, you know, there's entire organizations that are just about that. We had a great partnerships with Black Bitcoin billionaires during the New York mining moratorium bill. They wrote incredible stuff advocating for mining and why. So there's lots of groups and people out there of great ideas that can advocate on a wide variety of different issues. Like I just mentioned, there was when it's national security, we have I've co-founded an organization called BTC Vets with my friend Alex Brammer, who's a Bitcoin miner, and Jason Browder, who works at Marathon now, and he's a veteran as well. And we have hundreds of members who, in their spare time, want to advocate for Bitcoin from a national security perspective. So there's a lot of different ways to pull on people with different backgrounds and experiences to talk with policymakers, and that's one thing I would urge people to do.
It's really critical when I'm lucky, like living in the province of Alberta, when Premier Smith was running, she was already going to be emceeing one of my events for a tech symposium. And it was very kind of crypto focused. And when she told me she was running, I was like, oh my God, I think absolutely, you need to be here. You need to speak at this event because I need you to hear what everyone really has to say. And she did an amazing job, 2 full days she emceed. And then she started coming to our roundtables, right? The industry ones that we were doing specifically around digital assets and currency. So when she got in, we hosted a trade mission. We brought people up from the States and showed them, like, these are the kind of companies that would come in, make investments, full, like, mortgage paying jobs, what the kind of major policy points that she had was. And because she had already loved the industry so much, it was exciting. She saw it and she's like, okay, yeah, we definitely need to we have 2 ministers technically on our file right now. And we had multiple ministers actually lobbying to get to work with us on this file.
There's been incredible growth. I mean, I think you'll see that advocated more publicly in Canada eventually. And in the United States, I mean, we have several different presidential candidates who are extremely pro-crypto and want to make that part of their agenda.
Yeah, RFK Jr. is a really good one.
And RFK Jr.'s poll numbers just like destroyed Trump and Biden when it came to like independent likability voters. So this is not like it's a long shot, but it's not a crazy shot. There are a lot of presidential candidates who, you know, are passionate about this, who engage with us behind closed doors, who want to learn about it. And, you know, the amount of policymakers now that even know what Bitcoin or crypto is and can explain it, I mean, is mind-boggling to what it was a few years ago.
Oh, definitely. I was really excited because when our minister came and he spoke at the Texas Blockchain Summit, his comments publicly were like, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. Because he could see, he got to tour through Bitgear's facility. He was like, the fact that they have this level of investment and 300 full-time mortgage-paying jobs, he was beyond excited. He's like, I can't wait to see if we can start attracting this business here. And we have academic institutions going, all right, the trade schools, we want to build programs to train people on how to manage these facilities. So we're not only getting like our feasibility study, we're getting programs academically, we're getting government engagement and support, and I hope we can start seeing this in all provinces. So outside of like talking to policymakers, what do you think that the Canadian industry partners could really do to help push back on this negative narrative that we currently are experiencing?
Yeah, so my advice would be to kind of piggyback on what I said before. Know who your targeted policymaker is, know what's interested in them, and know what they're up against. Every policymaker now, front and center, is national security when it comes to crypto, right? So it's worth it now to pull those people you may know from the industry, or supporters, or people you know online who have a national security background, get them in front of those policymakers to explain why Bitcoin, digital assets, our industry in general is important for national security, for bolstering the Western ideals, democratic ideals that we cherish. And beyond that, I would say, try to come up with unique ideas. At BTC Vets, we're coming out with a book early next year through the Bitcoin Today Coalition, and we're putting out a book, and it's going to have different chapters explaining why Bitcoin is important for national security. So any ideas you can come up with, go for them, because it's kind of a blank slate. Policymakers are much more approachable than you think, and especially with Canadian Blockchain Consortium, they can connect you to folks. So don't think like, I've never talked to a policymaker before. Reach out, use Koleya.
Well, I do encourage, the more organizations, more companies we have within our network, the stronger we are when we go to approach government. Our goal is to try and make it to at least 100 companies supporting our organization, so we can continue to grow, so we can continue to advocate, so we can continue to put together research papers and trade missions and events all across country. So, the more of you that we can get engaged, even volunteering, supporting our committees, we want as many voices, as many perspectives, as many opportunities as we can to get out there and share this messaging and use the credibility that we've built within this organization, to be able to use that as our backing to go and be like, these are the kind of companies that support us. The fact that, we're able to get the authors and the KPMGs and the Deloittes and the Coinbases, the WonderFives, the Aquanauts, all these amazing companies that are behind us pushing this forward is really incredible. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being on this panel this morning and sharing your insights. And I hope you stay for the rest of the day. So.
Thank you.